After Seth, the god of chaos unalived his brother Osiris and took over his throne as the king of Egypt, he thought that it was all over, but he was heavily mistaken. Isis, Osiris's wife and the goddess of magic, brought him back from the dead and then birthed a son named Horus. Now Horus has come to Egypt to reclaim his father's throne from Seth. Who will win? How will it end? Watch on to witness the final battle in this epic clash of the gods of Egypt.
The Nile's waters surged under a scorching sun, parting for a sleek, fast wooden boat with highly decorated hieroglyphs, the boat that cut through the current like a blade. At its head, the navigator stood firmly, looking forward into the pyramids that lay just ahead of him. He was committed to get there as swift as possible, for it was time for him to claim his rightful throne. Horus, the youthful god, the face of a falcon and eyes that glowed like twin stars, stood at the helm of the boat. His golden armor gleamed, his spear crackling with celestial fire. His heart burned with righteous fury as he approached Memphis, Egypt's beating heart, where the royal palace loomed. Finally, the boat reached the shore, a cacophony of activities: smiths beating irons, builders raising stones, farmers ploughing fields, cows mowing and goats bleating, chickens running all over the place, as did children, traders haggling over prices. The whole of Egypt was a beehive of activity under the ever-watchful gaze of their new king and ruler, Seth. Horus leapt ashore, his boots striking the sun-baked stones with a resounding crack. The crack was as if a command that made everything stopped, and all eyes looked at the new entrant on the scene. The farmers stopped ploughing the fields, masons stopped, the ironsmiths stopped striking their hammers, cows stopped chewing the cud, roosters stopped crowing, even children stopped on their tracks, watching him keenly. Only a few hushed tones could be asking, "Who is that? Who is he?" Even more hushed responses would come, few and scattered. "I hear it is Pharaoh Seth's nephew." A few others would add by saying, "He is Horus, the son of our dead Pharaoh Osiris. He has come to claim the throne." No one dared speak too loud, lest one or more of Seth's ever-present spies overhears them. That would attract severe punishment. Most people just kept quiet and gathered in a crowd as they watched Horus step into the center of Memphis. The gathering slowly parted as Horus walked up from the river valley, forming a natural path that ended at the steps of the massive, imposing palace of the Pharaoh. The guards at the door dared not stop him. All of them were blown away by the might of his gaze and parted ways as he entered into the building. A powerful gust of wind surrounded his every step, the same one that used to surround Osiris, one court messenger was heard whispering. Horus stormed into the throne room. While partially darkened by the atmosphere of Seth, Horus could see clearly throughout the room. The walls were filled with hieroglyphs pulsed with ancient magic, casting an eerie glow across the chamber. Sprawled on Osiris's emerald-encrusted throne sat Seth, the iron-muscled god of chaos, his red eyes glinting with defiance. Seth's massive frame radiated raw power, a warhammer resting across his knees, its head etched with symbols of destruction. The air thickened with tension as Horus drove his spear into the floor, its tip sparking like a falling star. "Seth, usurper!" he bellowed, his voice shaking the pillars, dust raining from the ceiling. "I am Horus, son of Osiris, rightful king of Egypt. Abandon this throne or face the wrath of divine justice." Seth rose, towering like a sandstorm, his laughter a thunderclap that split the throne's armrest. "Rightful king, I am the strongest, boy. This throne is mine by might, not birthright. Osiris is dead, and Egypt needs a warrior, not a fledgling." He gripped his hammer, its head igniting with crimson flames, the heat warping the air. Horus's eyes blazed, his aura flaring like a solar storm, illuminating the room in golden light.
"And let the gods decide!"
He spread his arms, wings of light unfurling, their radiance casting long shadows. "To the council of gods we go!" Seth sneered, his body erupting in a blaze of crimson fire.
"So be it!"
With a roar that rattled the palace, he launched skyward, his form a blazing comet streaking across the heavens. Horus transformed into a majestic falcon, feathers glinting like polished bronze, and soared after him, his wings slicing through the clouds. The people of Egypt, now scattered all around the palace, scrambled for safety as the ground shook with the might of the gods who had launched into the sky with great force. People and animals ran in all directions as the ground underneath them shook heavily, as if it wanted to split at its seams and swallow them whole. Above them, the sky trembled. Thunderstorms struck, although it was in the middle of a rainless day. The sky turned into shades of red and orange as the force of the two gods flying into the distance shattered the very fiber of the sky. Seth and Horus flew on as they raced toward the sacred summit of Heliopolis, a mountain wreathed in divine mist where the council of gods awaited to judge their fate. In a radiant chamber atop Heliopolis's highest peak, carved from alabaster and lit by an eternal flame, the council of gods convened. The council consisted of 9 divine beings whose power and might endlessly shaped the cosmos. Ra, the sun god, sat at the center, his solar crown blazing like a supernova, his gaze molten with authority. Isis, the great sorceress, mother of Horus and sister to Seth, flanked him, her robes shimmering with starlight. Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of truth, clutched a stylus, glowing with lunar light, his calm demeanor belying his vast wisdom. 6 others, ANUBIS, with his jackal-like menace, Hathor, radiating golden warmth, Shu, cloaked in swirling winds, Tefnut, her eyes like storm clouds, Geb, the earth god, steady as stone, and Nut, the sky goddess, her presence vast, completed the council, their auras a kaleidoscope of divine energy. Horus landed in a gust of wind, reverting to his warrior form, his spear gleaming like a shard of the sun. Seth crashed down, shaking the chamber, his warhammer sparking with chaotic energy, cracks spiderwebbing the floor. Horus stepped forward, his voice resolute, echoing off the walls. "Council, I claim my father, Osiris's throne, as his son, and one true heir." The council fell silent before Nut, in an ethereal voice asked, "What say you, Seth?" Seth raised his hammer and said, "O great mother of the sky, is it not I, who is the strongest of all gods, who is better suited to inherit my brother's throne and protect the realms of men?" The council then asked them to leave the meeting chamber. Seth and Horus went into separate directions as the council deliberated on their appeals. When done, they were each called back to the room via a small rain cloud that touched their heads softly and said, "The verdict has been passed." When Seth and Horus got back to the council's meeting area, Thoth raised his stylus, its light cutting through the tension like a blade. "Justice demands the throne pass to Horus, son of Osiris. He is the rightful king 1,000,000 times." Isis's face lit with joy, and she cast a spell, her hands weaving a shimmering north wind that spiraled downward to the underworld, whispering to Osiris, "Our son will reign." Ra, however, leaned forward, his voice dripping with disdain, each word a burst of heat. "Seth is the strongest king, forged in fire and capable of shielding Egypt from all dangers. This boy is untested." His gaze scorched Horus, who stood defiant, his spear humming with power, its tip glowing brighter. Seth grinned, his teeth like jagged cliffs, his hammer raised high. "The council is biased. Isis favors this boy because he's her son. If you deny me, I'll strike down one god a day until you bow to my strength." He slammed his hammer into the floor, sending a shockwave that rattled the chamber, the eternal flame flickering. The council erupted in chaos, Anubis growled, his claws flexing. Hathor's eyes flared with golden fire. Shu's winds howled, whipping robes and hair. Isis countered, her voice sharp as a blade. "You dare threaten the gods, brother?" The familial rift between her and Seth, siblings bound by blood, yet torn by ambition, deepened the council's divide. Thoth, ever the mediator, raised his hand, his stylus pulsing. "Let us consult Neith, the great god's mother, to avoid unjust rulings." The council nodded, and Thoth's stylus flared, sending a papyrus scroll soaring through the heavens to Neith's temple. Her response arrived in a burst of starlight, her voice echoing like a cosmic bell. "Award Osiris's office to Horus, or inequity will bring cosmic ruin. The sky will touch the ground." Ra and Seth scoffed, their defiance a shared blaze. Ra spat, "Horus is despicable, a youth unfit for kingship." Seth roared, his hammer igniting, "I'll prove my worth in battle." The council, awake to Neith's warning, if the throne is not handed to Horus, but also aware of Seth's threats and calls of the trial being unfair, was stuck in a deadlock. They could not make a decision. Finally, Nut declared, "The trial will move to the island in the middle." "So be it," all the gods declared in unison. Further, to ensure fairness, the council banned any woman resembling Isis from joining the hearing. Unable to combat the ruling of the entire council, Isis had no choice but to agree to this ruling. As she walked away, her emerald eyes sharp with concern for Horus, Isis cast a wary glance at Seth. Her brother's crimson gaze unyielding, she saw the danger that lurked inside him. "I must stop Seth before he unalives my son, as he did my husband," she whispered as she walked off. The council's remaining 8 members, Ra, Thoth, Anubis, Hathor, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, and Nut, stirred, their auras flaring as they prepared to depart. Geb's command echoed, "Nemti, the ferryman, shall bear us to the island in the middle." The gods descended the mountain's jagged slopes, their steps shaking the earth, their powers trailing like comets. At the Nile's edge, where reeds swayed in a restless wind, Nemti awaited, his weathered boat bobbing on the churning waters. The ferryman, a sinewy figure with eyes like polished onyx, gripped his oar, his face etched with the weight of divine service. Nemti bowed low, his voice steady but reverent. "Great ones, climb aboard. The island in the middle awaits." The gods boarded, their weight causing the skiff to dip, yet it held firm, its glyphs flaring brighter. Ra took the prow, his crown casting a radiant halo that parted the river's mist. Shu's winds steadied the skiff, Tefnut's storms crackling in her gaze, while Geb and Nut anchored the rear, their presence a balance of earth and sky. Nemti pushed off, his oar slicing through the turbulent waters, the Nile roaring in protest. His skiff, though simple in appearance, was enchanted, its hull inscribed with faint glyphs that glowed faintly under the god's presence, warding off the river's wrath. The river churned, waves crashing like warring titans, but the skiff glided forward, guided by Nemti's skill and the god's power. Spectral crocodiles, manifestations of Sobek's will, surfaced briefly, their ember-like eyes watching before sinking back into the depths, acknowledging the council's authority. Above, storm clouds swirled, lightning flashing in sync with Ra's pulsing crown, illuminating the path to the island. The island in the middle rose from the Nile's heart like a shard of the cosmos, a mystical isle ringed by turbulent waters that churned with primal fury, their waves crashing against jagged rocks with roars like ancient beasts. The island's shores, fringed with black sand that glittered like crushed charcoal, were guarded by divine phoenixes. These wards, woven by Thoth's incantations and Ra's solar might, crackled with energy. The birds floated high above the island, forever on the watchout for intruders. Their flapping wings created massive waves around the island, shielding it from mortal eyes. The bird's sounds whispered spells that bound the island to the divine realm, a sacred arena where mortal and godly fates intertwined. The island's edges dropped into sheer cliffs, lashed by the Nile's wrath, where spectral crocodiles, manifestations of Sobek's will, patrolled the depths, their eyes glowing like embers. The island in the middle was no mere land. It was a crucible of divine will, a place where the balance of Mayat and chaos hung in the balance, its very existence a testament to the gods' eternal struggle. Seth, his eyes blazing like twin infernos, proposed a physical contest, his voice a challenge that shook the air. Let Horus and I clash on a boat at the island's heart. The victor claims the throne. Ra summoned a golden barge, its deck pulsating with enchantments, its hull carved with runes that glowed like embers. Horus and Seth leaped aboard, the air crackling as their divine powers collided, the council watching from the shore as the battle for Egypt's throne ignited. The island in the middle shimmered under a stormy sky, its shores lashed by waves that roared like primordial beasts. The magical barge bobbed atop the churning sea, its surface etched with glowing runes that pulsed with divine energy. Seth, his muscles rippling like coiled serpents, bellowed his first challenge, his voice a thunderous roar. Let's transform into hippopotamuses and dive into the deep. The first to surface, gasping for air, forfeits the throne. Horus nodded, his spear flashing as he morphed into a massive hippopotamus, his hide gleaming like polished obsidian, his eyes burning with determination. Seth followed, his form a monstrous beast with crimson eyes and jagged tusks, his bellow shaking the waves. With a thunderous splash, they plunged into the abyss, the sea boiling in their wake, bubbles rising like omens. Unseen, Isis, disguised as a frail old woman, her face weathered, but her eyes sharp, hobbled to the shore. Her heart pounded for Horus as she approached the ferryman Neith, his skiff bobbing by the water's edge. With a trembling hand, she offered a golden ring, its surface etched with ancient spells. "Take me to the island," she whispered, her voice laced with urgency. Neith, swayed by the ring's glow, rowed her across, the waves parting under her silent command. On the island, Isis peered into the depths, seeing only darkness, the waters hiding her son and brother. Fearing Seth's treachery that may cause the death of her son, she conjured a copper harpoon, its barb glowing with her sorcery, and hurled it into the sea with a sharp cry, the weapon slicing through the water like a comet and shot at the two hippopotami. The harpoon struck Seth, who roared, his voice bubbling up, a desperate plea. "Sister, spare your brother." Moved by his cry, Isis relented, withdrawing the harpoon with a flick of her wrist, the sea calming briefly. Horus, sensing the disturbance, surfaced in a fury, reverting to his godly form, his armor drenched and gleaming, his spear blazing with celestial fire. "Mother, you freed him!" he roared, his voice a tempest. In a blind rage, he lunged, his spear grazing Isis's arm, drawing a line of golden ichor that shimmered in the stormlight. Ra, watching from the barge, thundered, "Horus, you dare strike your mother!" Before anyone else could speak, Ra added, "The council must seize and punish him for showing such disrespect to his own mother." The council surged forward, their powers flaring. Shu's winds howled. Anubis's shadows coiled. Hathor's golden light blazed. Guilt-stricken, Horus transformed into a falcon, his wings slicing the air, and soared to the red desert's jagged mountains, fleeing their wrath, his heart heavy with shame. Seth, reverting to his towering form, gave chase, his warhammer trailing flames like a meteor, the desert trembling under his strides. Hathor, the goddess of love, joined the hunt, her golden whip crackling with divine energy, her eyes fierce with determination to protect Horus. Seth found Horus first. In the desert's heart, where cliffs stabbed the sky like broken spears, Horus had settled into a covered area in a cliff to plan his next steps after making a terrible error in striking Isis. Before he could collect his thoughts, Seth landed next to him and raised his hammer, starting a cataclysmic battle. Seth summoned sandstorms, his roars conjuring whirlwinds that hurled boulders, shattering peaks into rubble. Horus countered with gales from his falcon wings, his spear flashing like lightning, each thrust a streak of blinding light that scorched the sand to glass. Hathor soon arrived and took steps to contain the battle. She lashed out her whip, binding Seth's arm just as he was about to strike down Horus. But Seth broke free, his strength a tidal wave, his hammer swinging in arcs of destruction. He twisted rocks into solid ropes that held her back as he lunged toward Horus. Seth overpowered Horus, pinning him against a mountainside, the desert quaking under their struggle. "Yield, boy," he snarled, his hammer raised to crush Horus's skull, its glow casting his face in hellish light. Horus, bloodied and battered, transformed into a falcon and slipped free, his wings sparking as he fled to an oasis, collapsing beneath a shanusha tree, his energy drained, his breaths ragged, his armor dented and scorched. Seth, relentless, prowled the desert, his senses honed like a predator's, his hammer dragging furrows in the sand. Finding Horus, he pounced, seizing him in a vice-like grip, the air crackling with his chaotic power. With a cruel laugh, he tore out Horus's eyes, the sun and moon of Egypt, his claws dripping with divine ichor, the light of Horus's gaze fading. He buried them in the sand, where they sprouted as glowing lotus bulbs, their radiance illuminating the night like fallen stars. Seth stormed back to the council, his hammer dripping with triumph, his voice a growl that shook the shore. "Horus is lost! Crown me king!" The council hesitated, their eyes scanning the horizon, their powers humming with unease. "No ruling without both contenders," Thoth declared, his stylus pulsing like a heartbeat. Hathor, searching the desert, found Horus weeping, blind and broken, his face streaked with golden tears. She knelt, her hands glowing with healing light, and milked a gazelle, pouring the warm liquid into his sockets with a gentle chant. Horus's eyes reformed, blazing brighter than ever, twin orbs of cosmic fire that lit the oasis. "I'm whole," he declared, embracing Hathor, his strength surging, his spear gleaming anew. She escorted him back, her whip coiled, and proclaimed to Ra, "Horus lives!" On the island in the middle, Seth, enraged by Horus's return, pounded his hammer into the earth, splitting the shore, waves surging in response. "We'll race in boats of stone," he roared, his voice a challenge that drowned the storm. "The victor claims the throne." Horus, his resolve hardened, crafted a pine boat coated with light gypsum, disguised as stone, its hull shimmering with falcon motifs, its sails catching the wind. Seth, brute strength incarnate, cut out an entire mountaintop, its weight shaking the island. His roars echoed like an earthquake, the stone carved with symbols of chaos. The council gathered, their powers holding the turbulent sea at bay, their eyes locked on the contenders. The boats launched, Horus's vessel skimming the waves with agile grace, its runes glowing like embers. Seth's monolith sank like an anchor, the sea swallowing it in a frothing vortex that roared like a dying beast. Roaring, Seth transformed into a hippopotamus, his jaws snapping like iron traps, and rammed Horus's boat, splintering its prow into kindling, the wreckage floating like broken dreams. Horus, undaunted, conjured a copper harpoon, its tip blazing with solar fire, and aimed for Seth's hide, the weapon singing through the air with deadly precision. The council shouted, "Hold, Horus!" their voices a divine chorus, halting the strike mid-flight, the harpoon hovering before falling into the sea. The sea stilled, but the deadlock remained. The gods' faces etched with frustration, their powers flickering in the stormlight. Horus, his patience fraying, leaped from the wreckage of his boat, his armor gleaming under the clouds, his spear a beacon of defiance. "Enough of my uncle's games," he declared, his voice cutting through the wind like a blade. He boarded a new skiff, its sails woven with starlight, and sailed through tempestuous waves to Sais, where Neith's temple glowed like a beacon, its spires piercing the heavens. Kneeling before her altar, he pleaded, his voice raw, "Great Mother, end this strife." Scythe's voice thundered, shaking the earth, her presence a storm of divine will. "Take this to Osiris in the underworld. Let the former king decide his heir." The council of the gods heard her voice from beyond the river, and had no choice but to comply with her wish. "Anubis!" Geb called out. The jackal-headed god looked at the source of the commanding voice. "Journey to the underworld and seek out Osiris's opinion on this matter." Anubis nodded and walked from the center of the island, in the middle, and headed toward the edge of the Nile. Beneath a moonless sky, Anubis stood on a desolate bank of the Nile, the air sharp with the tang of desert dust. His jackal head gleamed under starlight, obsidian eyes unblinking. In his grip, a staff of ebony and gold thrummed with latent power, its ankh-shaped head glowing faintly. He raised the staff, pausing for a breath, then drove it into the cracked earth with a force that echoed like a thunderclap. The ground shuddered and split, a jagged fissure yawning wide, exhaling a chill mist that smelled of iron and eternity. The underworld gaped below, its depths lit by an eerie crimson glow. From the chasm, a parallel Nile surged into view, its waters a vivid, unnatural red, flowing thick and slow like spilled blood. It carved through a landscape of green stone and spectral reeds, where shadows writhed in the current. On its surface, tethered by no visible means, waited Anubis's boat, a sleek vessel of bone-white wood, its prow carved into a snarling jackal. Anubis stepped forward, his linen cloak trailing like liquid shadow. The air shimmered as he descended, his form weightless, gliding over the fissure's edge. He floated toward the boat, landing softly on its deck, the vessel steady beneath him, despite the red Nile's sluggish churn. The ship glided not on the red waters, but over a shimmering void, a river of shadows that churned with whispers of the dead. He had been bound for the Duat, the underworld, to seek Osiris, lord of the dead, whose wisdom he sought on a matter of cosmic balance, a soul too potent to judge, teetering between salvation and damnation. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of myrrh and decay. Spectral currents tugged at the bark, and Anubis gripped a staff topped with a golden ankh, its light cutting through the gloom. Around him, the underworld unfurled. Jagged cliffs of black stone loomed, etched with hieroglyphs that writhed and moaned. Shades drifted past, their forms flickering like candle flames, eyes hollow with longing. Some reached for the ship, but Anubis's gaze, sharp and unyielding, held them at bay. The bark hummed with divine purpose, slicing through veils of mist that parted like torn silk. Gripping his staff, he gazed into the underworld's heart, where Osiris's judgment throne lay hidden beyond veils of mist. The bark drifted forward, unbidden, slicing above the crimson waters toward the Lord of the Dead, as the fissure above began to seal, swallowing the mortal world from view. A cavern yawned ahead, its mouth framed by colossal statues of Osiris, their emerald eyes glowing with judgment. The bark slowed as it entered, the void river narrowing into a glassy pool. At its center, a throne of bone and lotus rose, where Osiris sat, his green skin radiant, his Atef crown tipped with ostrich plumes. In the shadowed halls of the underworld, where souls flickered like dying embers and the air was thick with the weight of eternity, Anubis saw the face of Osiris, the green god. He was enthroned amid skeletal shapes, his scepter pulsing with necrotic energy, his skin shimmering with the verdant hue of rebirth. His presence was a weight, a stillness that silenced even the restless dead. Anubis stepped onto the shore, knelt briefly, then rose to meet his father's gaze. "Speak, guardian of the scales," Osiris intoned, voice like stone grinding against stone. What soul troubles the balance? Anubis straightened, his words precise, carrying the weight of eternity as he delivered the message of the gods. O great lord of the underworld, who is it that should sit on your throne in the land of the Egypt? His eyes flared with fury, the cavern trembling as he rose, shadows coiling around him. You dare interrupt my judgment of the dead? He roared, his voice a landslide that echoed through Duat. My son Horus is the rightful king. He pointed his scepter at the council, shadows writhing like serpents. You cheat my son, and I'll unleash savage messengers to drag your hearts to Duat. I'll blight the wheat and barley that sustain you, leaving your altars barren. Ra, his solar crown flaring, countered, his voice a blaze of defiance. Crops would grow without you, Osiris. But Osiris's will was iron, his presence a storm of divine authority that dimmed even Ra's light. Justice lies buried with me. I decide the king. The council bowed, their auras dimming in reverence, the air heavy with Osiris's decree. Thoth's stylus glowed, inscribing the verdict. Horus is doubly correct. The gods returned to the island in the middle, where Horus stood ready, his spear a beacon of light, his armor polished by the storm's spray. Seth, his hammer lowered, faced him, the air thick with their rivalry, the waves roaring like a chorus of fate. Atum, chair of the council, raised his hand, his voice resonating like a gong across the sea. Isis, bind Seth! Isis appeared in a flash of starlight, her sorcery weaving manacles of star-forged iron that snapped around Seth's wrists, their chains glowing with unbreakable enchantments, their weight forcing him to his knees. Seth, his pride shattered, met Horus's gaze, his crimson eyes flickering with reluctant surrender. Let Horus take his father's office, he growled, his voice a low rumble, the words torn from his soul. Horus stood tall, his armor reflecting the dawn, his presence a pillar of divine resolve. Atum placed the white crown upon his head, its radiance bathing the island in light, its weight a testament to his destiny, its jewels gleaming like captured stars. You are a good king of Egypt, Atum proclaimed, his words echoing across the Nile, carried by the wind to every corner of the land. Isis wept with joy, her magic weaving a canopy of stars above, their light dancing on the waves. My son, you shine like the sun, she cried, her voice a song of triumph that stirred the hearts of gods and mortals alike. Ta, the craftsman god, his hands still dusted with creation's clay, stepped forward, his voice steady as the earth. What of Seth? He asked, his eyes scanning the council. Ra, his anger cooled, gazed at the horizon, where storm clouds gathered, their edges lit by his light. He'll dwell with me, thundering in the sky as my son, he declared, his crown pulsing with resolve, his voice a promise of balance. Ra's sun barge descended, its golden hull blazing like a second sun, its prow carved with the eyes of Horus, its sails billowing with solar fire. Seth climbed aboard, his form crackling with storm clouds, his hammer now a scepter of lightning, his presence a tempest bound to Ra's will. The barge soared into the heavens, leaving a trail of thunder that shook the earth, Seth's roars blending with the sky's fury, a reminder of chaos tamed. Egypt erupted in celebration. Temples rang with hymns, priests danced in the streets, their voices rising in praise, and the Nile sparkled under Horus's reign, its waters reflecting the dawn. The council, their hearts satisfied, gathered on the island's shore, their powers weaving a tapestry of light that blessed the land. Anubis's shadows softened, Hathor's laughter rang like bells, and Thoth's stylus inscribed the tale for eternity, its ink glowing with truth. Isis stood beside Horus, her hand on his shoulder as he gazed across his kingdom, the falcon king whose wings would shield Egypt forever. In the fields, the wheat and barley grew tall, kissed by Osiris's blessing, their stalks swaying in the breeze. The stars above shone brighter, guided by Horus's eyes. They light a beacon for the living. And in the heavens, Seth's thunder rolled, a distant echo of his power as he fought the light-hating snake Apep, helping the sun rise every day on Ra's eternal voyage across the sky. Egypt was whole, its heart beating under the reign of Horus, the good king, and the land rejoiced in peace, its story etched in the annals of the gods, a saga of triumph that would echo through the ages.
Thanks for watching yet another episode of Timbuktu Tales. Like, share and subscribe to watch more of such amazing tales from Africa. Are there any stories you would like us to work on? Feel free to share your ideas in the comments section below. And hey, don't forget to hit that notification bell to always get updates.